right now from KTAB News, your local election headquarters. This is Big Country Politics.
Thanks for being here. I'm Victor Sotelo. We start with news from your local election headquarters. The 2020 vice presidential debate was held in Salt Lake City, and while it was certainly more civil than the presidential debate a week earlier, the two candidates still had many pointed disagreements. Here's political reporter Chip Yost.
Whatever the vice president is claiming the administration has done, clearly it hasn't worked. When you're looking at over 210,000 dead bodies in our country, American lives.
When you say what the American people have done over these last 8 months hasn't worked, that's a great disservice to the sacrifices the American people have made.
Separated by a distance of more than 12 feet and with plexiglass barriers between them, Senator Kamala Harris and Vice President Mike Pence sparred not only over the initial handling of the pandemic, but also over some of the ongoing efforts to end it.
If the Trump administration approves a vaccine before or after the election, should Americans take it, and would you take it?
If the public health professionals, if Dr. Fauci, if the doctors tell us that we should take it, I'll be the first in line to take it, absolutely. But if Donald Trump tells us that we should take it, I'm not taking it.
The fact that you continue to undermine public confidence in a vaccine, if the vaccine emerges during the Trump administration, I think is unconscionable. And Senator, I just ask you, stop playing politics with people's lives.
The two also debated traditional topics, including what to do with the open Supreme Court seat and taxes.
And coming up a little later in the show, we will talk more about the debate with McMurray political science professor Dr. Paul Fabrizio. Now back to Texas. The Texas Supreme Court has ruled on two cases that affects voters across the Lone Star State. KTAB Austin Bureau correspondent Maggie Glenn is at the Capitol with an update.
The state's high court today denied the Texas Republican Party's attempt to cut Governor Abbott's extension on early voting. That means voters will still be able to cast their ballots early starting on Tuesday. The court says reversing the governor's extension would be confusing to voters this close to the election. In a separate case, the court is banning Harris County Clerk Chris Hollins from sending unsolicited mail-in ballot applications to all 1.9 million registered voters in his county. The all-Republican court says the state's election code does not allow clerks to send an application to a voter who has not requested one.
That's another example of Republicans trying to control local entities and tell them what they're doing. You know, Texas is built on local control.
The court also states that because no other election official has ever done what Hollins was proposing, it could undermine the state's requirement of uniform operation of election laws across Texas. Keep in mind, though, that voters may still get applications to vote by mail from private entities, which are allowed to send out an application regardless of receiving a request. In Austin, Maggie Glenn, back to you.
And other political news here in Abilene. Abilene Mayor Anthony Williams is endorsed by three separate groups, in his bid for re-election: the Abilene Professional Firefighters Association, the Abilene Police Officers Association, and the Abilene Association of Realtors, all speaking up to support the mayor after voting by their memberships. The November 3rd ballot will have city and county races depending on where you live, along with state and federal offices. Voting times and locations can be found at our website at bigcountryhomepage.com. Voting begins on Tuesday. Now to our eye on Taylor County. The 98th Annual County Judges and Commissioners Association of Texas Conference was in town last week. Commissioners gathering from all over the state of Texas to discuss key topics to help them better their counties. One major topic this year is budgeting during the pandemic, and for some counties things seem to be going well, but this isn't the case for everyone.
Lubbock County collects sales tax, and so our sales tax numbers really have not gone down at all. They've held, and actually we've increased, we've budgeted more sales tax this upcoming fiscal year.
The restaurants are all closed, drive-thrus are open. A lot of people have just been put totally out of business.
And the new fiscal year starts October for the counties. They're hoping they can bounce back after the pandemic. Other news made in Austin this week as Governor Abbott okayed the reopening of bars in Texas. The governor announcing that beginning on October 14th, county judges working with the Texas Alcoholic Beverages Commission may allow bars and similar businesses to open at 50% capacity. There will also be social distancing requirements inside the bars. The governor also releasing new guidelines for businesses, including amusement parks, movie theaters, zoos, aquariums, and bowling alleys. They can expand to 75% capacity. All this if a county has 15% or less of COVID hospitalizations. Taylor County Judge Downing Bowles says if people can be responsible, he is comfortable with the governor's plan.
If we can all be responsible and act responsibly and live within the thing as it moves through. Remember, we're starting small and then starting to work out as we're able to handle it. So if we can do that, I don't have any problem with us moving in that direction.
And links to the new guideline rules as well as the governor's full statement are on our website at bigcountryhomepage.com. All right, now to our eye on education, and in the Abilene School District, there's been a lot of conversation about changing the names of schools, and now there's a new plan to change the education style of one of those schools. KTAB's Dan Booth has information on how Lee Elementary is adopting the Ron Clark Academy teaching style. The theory is the potential to provide more opportunities for students who are socially and economically disadvantaged.
That can take these kids to a significantly higher academic level than they have been achieving in the past.
Next school year, Abilene ISD is trying something new, and bringing teachers from across the district to Lee Elementary's campus is just part of it.
You want to create a model school environment where you take the very best teachers, put them with the very hardest students to demonstrate how to effectively educate all kinds of students.
Duke says the Ron Clark Academy teaching style is meant to create new opportunities for underachieving students by focusing on their social and emotional learning as well as academics.
You don't feel like you're in a school building. You feel like you're at camp. The building doesn't look the same. The teachers don't act like traditional teachers. There is a family element.
To learn as much as they can from other educators, in this system, teachers will open their classrooms to the rest of the district, and according to Abilene ISD Superintendent Dr. David Young, maybe even teachers from across the region.
The people that they learn the very best from are from watching other teachers and helping each other perfect their craft.
We truly believe that the best professional development is seeing great teaching in action, and that's what Ron Clark believes as well.
Duke says instead of using teaching methods from decades ago, using new ideas to meet the needs of today's students has the potential to be more effective.
A big part of it is just the expectation that you can do so much more than what you're accomplishing now, and not accepting mediocrity in terms of what our kids can accomplish.
For BigCountryHomepage.com, I'm Dan Booth.
And Dr. Young says he doesn't expect this to change or have an impact on the process of renaming Lee Elementary. Both the new teaching philosophy and the new name will be in place when the 2021 school year begins. All right, still to come on Big Country Politics, we continue our focus on the vice presidential debate with Dr. Paul Fabrizio with McMurray University. We're back in 2 minutes.
Big Country Politics on KTAB continues.
All right, welcome back to Big Country Politics, and joining us today is Dr. Paul Fabrizio with McMurray University, political science professor. Thank you for being on the show. Lots to talk about today.
Yes, there is.
I mean, where do we start? I mean, I guess we start with the vice presidential debate. We all saw the presidential debate. And what a contrast. I mean, how did the vice president and the nominee for vice president do?
That's such an interesting question, because you want to go into great detail about what they did and what they didn't do and all that stuff.
Let's talk about perception. Let's talk about first glances. Here's the thing. I think I had tennis last night, or the night of the debate. I had a volleyball game, then we had to go home and eat dinner. I imagine a lot of people are going to be watching this debate through the news.
Right. And a lot of people, if they even sat down to watch it, probably were checking their phone through it all, talking to other people. It was not must-see TV, is I think the safest way to say it. Both candidates came with assignments from their campaign. Mike Pence had to defend the record of Donald Trump. And Kamala Harris had to defend the record of Joe Biden and also reassure people that Joe Biden was not some radical socialist. So they went with their assignments. They basically ignored the questions that were asked.
That was my next question to you. I actually sat down and watched the last 2 or 3 questions by the time I got down in front of my TV that night. And they didn't answer questions.
They didn't, and they interrupted each other. Not as bad as a week ago with the 2 presidential candidates, but they chose to do what they needed to do to send the message they needed to send, regardless of the rules, regardless of their opponent, regardless of the question.
Well, it's the first rule in PR, really. You let the person ask you your question and you answer the question that you want to answer. You get out what you're there to get out.
Exactly. And that's what they tried to do. And you can't blame them for that, but does it make compelling TV? No. In the end, what is probably going to be the big thing that people remember from this? The fly that was on the head of the vice president. And you know, I feel bad for him. He chose to ignore it or didn't know it was there, but when it was there, you were just looking at that. And if that is more memorable than anything the candidates said, that tells you something about the debate.
That fly made headlines, so that tells you something.
It tells you something. And also the fact that the Biden campaign is trying to fundraise off a fly that landed on the head of the vice president. It's like, what a strange world we live in.
Let's talk about Kamala Harris. She's only the 4th woman ever to appear for both parties. This was a historic moment.
Yes.
The debate was.
Yes, and I thought it was a really important thing that Mike Pence recognized that. Certainly Kamala Harris brought it up, but Mike Pence also recognized that too, and I think that was important to say. Once that's done, and once the symbolism of her being there is acknowledged, then we just get back to the reality that these 2 are vice presidential candidates, and they're not the principals, and in the end, we're not going to make our voting decision based on these 2 people.
Although I did want to see, because I wanted to get in front of the TV. I was busy that night with the kids and their sports and then dinner, but I wanted to sit down in front of the TV. And the one reason I wanted to sit down, not the one reason, but one of the reasons I wanted to sit down was to watch Pence. And although he may not look, or he may not be looking to run for president, I just wanted to see if he looked presidential. It was just, you know. And the same thing for Harris.
Sure, and I think there's that acknowledgement in our mind that either of these people could take over from either Trump or Biden if something bad were to happen, and we pray nothing happens, obviously. I mean, that's just part of the nature of the thing. But I think at another level, we need to remember that both of these are very ambitious politicians, and they're thinking about 2024, and there's a possibility we could see these 2 people again, but in a presidential debate in 2024 or in 2028, because they're young enough where that could happen.
Well, and I think that's the very little bit of it that I saw. That's the lens I went in to see. I went to look through that lens to watch this debate, and I don't know why it was the overriding factor for me. I just wanted to see. Do you think a lot of people felt that way, or?
I just don't know. I mean, when I was watching the debate and I watched the whole thing, I never really thought about them.
You never did.
In that way. I thought of them as surrogates for their presidential candidates. And in the back of my mind, I know that they could take over for the presidency if horrible things happen. But that wasn't really what it's about. And I might be like that. It might just be me. But one of the things about the vice presidency is I think it diminishes or minimizes the candidates, because in the end, they're not talking about themselves. They're talking about somebody else. So I think that forces our attention onto the 2 presidential candidates.
And they did keep referring back, at least the part that I saw, they did keep referring back to their running mates.
Right, and they
answering the non-questions, or however you want to say that.
Right. And in the end, both of them were attacking not each other, but their running mates.
But the running mates.
Yeah. So that's just the nature of these vice presidential things. And the reality is how long will we talk about this vice presidential debate? My guess is
today.
Today. And that's it.
Yeah, that's right.
We're done.
Well, because here's why. Because the presidential debate, the first one, was so, I don't know what you call it, but those of you who watched it.
Overbearing, a train wreck,
I don't know.
Horrible to watch.
And so we're looking forward to the other one, and there's news on that one now, and they're wrapping us up. So when we come back, we want to talk about the next presidential debate. We'll be back on Big Country Politics.
Big Country Politics on KTAB continues.
All right, continue our conversation with Dr. Paul Fabrizio, political science professor over at McMurray University. We've talked about the vice presidential debate, and of course we have to look forward to the presidential debate, the second one, and it's going to be a little different if it happens at all, because Trump says he may not participate.
Right, and that was because it was announced that this second debate is going to be a virtual one. It was a town hall format where the candidates were supposed to actually be in front of undecided voters, if you can imagine they still exist, in Florida. And so the commission announced that they decided that they'll have the candidates in separate places, virtually.
Maybe not even in that state.
Not even in that state if necessary. And part of that is because there's concern that the president still might be contagious. And so also as a way to establish control of the debate. They want to have control of the debate, not the presidential candidate.
Well, so Thursday when this happened, when they made this announcement, the push alerts came out on Big Country homepage. I was at home getting ready for work. First push alert comes, virtual debates.
Yes.
5 minutes later, second push alert comes, Trump's not going to participate in virtual debates. And there's probably a reason for that, and a lot of it is probably control, right?
Yes, it is actually part of the Republican strategy in these debates. They want President Trump to be in charge. They want him to be the dominant person.
They want him to be able to interrupt.
They want him to be able to interrupt. So they agreed to rules, and then their debate strategy was the opposite of those rules. And that followed through in the vice presidential debate last night. Mike Pence interrupted 15 times during the debate. Now, that's nothing like the 75 times that President Trump did a week ago, but still, Mike Pence followed through that strategy. We have things to talk about. We're not going to let the rules stop us from talking about them.
So here's the next question. We are talking about national politics on a local political show where we usually reserve this time for local politics, although we get into national stuff sometimes. But I'm sure this is happening all over the country. This is a political, this is a presidential race that's taking the attention of everybody. So what does it tell you that we're doing this now here? And what we're talking about is tactics, really, during the last debate and the upcoming debate, and not really policy.
Well, what it tells you, first of all, is that this race has been nationalized. All the local things can't compete for simply the force of Trump's personality, the importance of the national election. So on the first thing, that is what's going on. I feel sorry for local candidates. I feel sorry for statewide candidates because everything is seen in the context of the presidential race. But secondly, it is actually not unique in these debates, in these times, that we are talking about tactics. That's easier to talk about than policy. It's not. Let's be honest, sometimes talking about policy is boring. I hate to say it, but sometimes it's boring, whereas tactics is always interesting. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we're into right now. And we got to remember, the Republicans didn't even have a party platform. In their convention, they used the platform from 4 years ago. The Democrat platform has not been referred to by Joe Biden. To be honest, the candidates really aren't talking about policy either. They're talking about broader things.
At the local level, do you think this presidential race is so dividing that a lot of people at the local level are just kind of waiting to see what happens, which way it goes? I mean, they're not.
I don't know. And I'm not sure how to interpret the question, because I look around and I see more and more signs going up all over the city for one candidate over the other. I see a lot of signs for Anthony Williams, who's running for re-election. I haven't seen much for his opponent, though.
This is true. So that stuff is obviously still going on, and we're still going to see all that on the ballots, but it's just not garnering as much attention as the president and the race.
Yeah, and
how can you?
How can you? That's the whole thing. One of the things that's so amazing is the ability of President Trump to command our attention. He is a master at getting our attention. And if I can just make this comment, you know, we've been involved in debates at the local level. How many candidates at the local level are thinking in a future election, I'm going to ignore the rules, I'm going to adopt what President Trump or what Mike Pence did, and ignore all the things that I agreed to beforehand, and just talk right through things, and just try to get as much time as I can. And I'm not sure that debates are going to be as effective as a campaign technique in the future, because of what's taken place in the last 2 weeks.
Well, I guess the moderators are just going to have to get a little more control, and one way to do that is to go to this virtual format where mics can be clipped, turned off, while the other, and that's kind of what they talked about during the face-to-face debate in the second one.
And yet, what is the president's response? I'm not going to participate if it's that way. So we'll see next week as we get closer to the debate what's going to happen. But candidates want more control in these things. The president is showing how to get more control.
Last question here, looking forward to the next debate, and they're wrapping us up. Do you, real quick, do you see Trump participating?
No, I don't.
You don't see Trump participating?
No.
All right, they're wrapping us up. Dr. Paul Fabrizio McMurray, political science professor. We'll be back on Big Country Politics.
Big Country Politics on KTAB continues.
And that does it for this week's edition of Big Country Politics. Remember, for the latest political headlines, always go to bigcountryhomepage.com, and we'll see you next week. Same time, same place. Thanks for watching.